All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.
Welcome to All Rights Reserved. Happy Saturday morning. Get your cup of coffee, your tea, whatever you need to lean in. I'm your host, Yolanda Taylor, the voice behind this mic, also known as the community lawyer. Today, we are discussing a story that has shaken many of us in the legal community right here in Wake County, North Carolina. Recently, 2 attorneys were shot in downtown Raleigh as they were leaving the courthouse. Thankfully, both survived, but the reports are that they were shot multiple times in what seems to be almost like an ambush. The criminal justice system, however, will ultimately decide what happened and what accountability may look like for the defendant. But beyond the headlines, this tragedy raises difficult questions that deserve thoughtful discussion. Questions about mental health, questions about access to justice, questions about what happens when people feel unheard, unseen, maybe disconnected, or overwhelmed by the systems that they don't understand. And questions about whether or not our legal system is truly accessible to everyone who needs it. As Black attorneys, these conversations can be especially complicated for us. We believe in accountability. We believe in justice. We stand with victims, but many of us also understand that people do not arrive at a breaking point in isolation. We recognize that mental health challenges, trauma, poverty, and system barriers often intersect with legal problems in a way that are impossible to ignore. We come from impacted communities. We come from families that may have people who have had interactions with the judicial system. We, too, individually may have been impacted by social issues, right? That may not have winded up in court, but nevertheless, these social issues may have caused us to experience some form of oppression. But today is not about deciding guilt or innocence. That is the role of the courts. But today is about asking these bigger questions around these bigger topics. How do we prevent crises before they happen? How do we improve access to justice? How do we support people struggling mental health challenges? And how do we build a legal system that people trust enough to seek help before situations spiral out of control? Joining me today is a friend and a colleague, Attorney Antoine Marshall. Our Attorney Marshall has dedicated his career to expanding access to justice. He has served in private practice, he's worked with Legal Aid of North Carolina, and most recently he served as the director of the Wake County Legal Support Center, helping countless of individuals navigate the legal system pro se. Attorney Marshall, welcome to All Rights Reserved.
Thank you so much, Yolanda, for the invitation and the opportunity to speak today.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm glad you were available to be here today. So let's get into it. Let's talk first, I think, about the human impact. Some of the things I was raising. As I guess, as someone who has worked on the front lines of access to justice, what was your reaction when you learned about the shooting?
So the interesting thing, thankfully, first of all, we're thankful that the attorney survived, that there were no casualties as a result of this shooting. The interesting thing was I had just finished my last day at the courthouse the day prior when the shooting came. So my first text actually came from one of my former coworkers in the legal support center who informed me that there was a shooting outside. Wow. And I think for anybody who's been downtown, worked at the courthouse, worked there frequently, there seems to always be something going on at the courthouse. There's always, there's obviously a lot of police presence down there. This was not the first time that something like this has happened. I recall being at the courthouse before where there was shooting outside. It reminds you of, when you're dealing with the public, how serious the issues that you're dealing with are, the stress that a lot of people are under when you're dealing with anytime people have to go down to the courthouse, it's never for anything trivial. I mean, you're dealing with families, you're dealing with property, you're dealing with money, you're dealing with jobs. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of people who walk out of the courthouse disappointed or upset or frustrated about what happens in the courthouse. But also somebody who worked in the courthouse, you get a chance to see and interact with the people who work there every day. And they are people just like everybody else. And, they're going to do a job. So there's definitely kind of balancing the understanding of the frustration and the stress that people carry into the courthouse and sometimes leave the courthouse with, but also understand the human element of the people who are doing those jobs and doing that job on a daily.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so like you're saying, that's not the place like, oh, I'm going down to the courthouse today. Yay! That's like, I'm so happy that's part of my day. That's not like ever what anyone thinks about. Even the lawyers who probably have to work there, right? It's not there. It's not like this exciting thing to be. And some people are taking off from their jobs. So, they might be worried about job security for having to do that. And then they might be afraid. And like what we're talking about, a lot of people may be unrepresented. So we talked about, the folks who have to go there because of maybe a court matter, civil, criminal, or what have you. What impacts do you think it have, incidents like this that we're talking about that happened with the shooting of the two attorneys? The alleged shooter is Gwendolyn White, a Black woman, middle-aged Black woman in her late 50s. I will say someone that when you initially saw the video, I remember the video, the main one that was released first. I think a witness, a kid or a teenager or a young man was like, whose mama is this?
Yeah.
And then we just see a woman that you wouldn't fit, in my opinion. That's the stereotype of someone who's trying to ambush somebody allegedly and shoot people like in this walkway. And this walkway where the attorneys were, is it kind of like almost like an alley? I know that there are different ways. I'm thinking, was this the old courthouse or the new courthouse?
It was the old courthouse. And
okay, so there is an alley. Yep.
Yeah, if you're familiar with the Wake County Old Courthouse, there's on both sides of the building, there's a walkway where you can get from the Fayetteville side where like the ABC building is and to the Salisbury side, which is the side that faces the Justice Center, the Sheriff's Office, and things like that. So there's a little walkway on both sides of the building. It is more or less like a little alley that people walk through, and people take it regularly.
Well, you know what? I've never taken it, and I'm glad I haven't. I never will now, but I've never taken it. I've always either gone out the front door or the back door.
Yeah, and also if you're familiar with the courthouse, if you exit the building on the Fayetteville side, you're exiting on the first floor, or you can just take the elevator down one more flight and you exit in the back door.
Yes.
So rarely do you have to head out the building and then around the building. It's a lot easier just to go through the building to get out. But if it's a nice day outside, I'll go outside just to walk around.
No, I don't want to speculate here, but I guess I am. Like, we don't know the facts of why the folks did what they did. Do you think they were coming out doing that alley? You think they were trying to come out in a way that maybe they thought was going to be safe? Because allegedly, according to the media, allegedly, Miss White had become belligerent in court. And then there's been some audio tapes of her, saying that she was going to get someone. I don't know who she was referring to. And then she was like, see ya. And then she left, right? Do you think they came out the alleyway because it was probably more safe? I don't know if the alley is a safer way or a more discreet way, because I've never taken that way out of the courthouse.
No, I think there could be a lot of things going on. I know that when I practice in any hearing I go to, and when I'm with my clients, if there is a situation where tensions are high during the court setting, I usually make sure that, give myself some time, so I don't have my clients walk out with the other side, hey, we're going to sit in the courthouse for 5 to 10 minutes before we leave. And honestly, I think, most attorneys who have gone through that process, they tend to do that. And I'm sure that, these two attorneys, they worked for a larger firm. I know that the town of Roseville was just one of their clients. I'm sure they probably had other matters in the court. Again, we're speculating, but I would assume that, the time distance between them being in court and them leaving the courthouse, there was probably a good bit of time where, because obviously she had time to go to her car and come back. So obviously there was a a gap in time there. I'm sure they were either handling other cases or talking to people they knew in the courthouse, and they were just heading back to their cars. I don't think that they took this route, in particular with Miss White in mind. I think, again, you talk to somebody
We don't know.
on the
We're
first
just
floor.
speculating. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you just
We
head out
really
and
don't know.
my car's over here, their car, they may have parked somewhere else. Okay, I'm gonna talk to my client and then I'm gonna go to my car. But I honestly don't think that they took a special route or did anything differently than they would normally do leaving the courthouse. Because again, I think you give them time and you assume, like I assume, like when I let the other party go first, that they're leaving, and 10 minutes later they're not sitting around waiting for me.
Yes. Well, I mean, initially when I heard the reports, I was like, I know that couldn't have happened inside the courthouse because of
Yeah.
security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so at least we can say that security is intact as it relates to being able to come through the courthouse and being able to bring a weapon. But now we have this other bigger concern. It's like, what happens outdoors? Like, who's there? I mean, you have protection inside the courthouse, but you necessarily do not have protection. And when I say protection, there's not really a heavy presence of law enforcement on guard for things like this outside of the courthouse.
Well, I think, I mean, again, this is not the first time there's been a shooting. I recall there was a drive-by shooting that occurred maybe 3 or 4 years ago, right outside the courthouse. I think number one, I do give law enforcement a lot of credit for responding very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The sheriff's office is right across the street from the Wake County
Yeah, it
Courthouse.
really is.
So, I don't think that you have anybody on guard, but I will say that there's a lot of police presence. There's a lot of law enforcement presence out there. And usually if something happens in the courthouse, you can see the sheriff's office respond very quickly.
Yes, right there.
So I think, I know that they're going to revisit some security protocols about what happens outside the building. But I mean, again, you're right there next to the sheriff's office. The Raleigh PD is not far down the street. They have their headquarters not far down the street. A lot of times you have law enforcement in there testifying to different cases. So there's a lot of law enforcement presence in the area, which I guess
Yeah,
also makes it very shocking that somebody would try to do something like this in that area, because I mean, there's law
yeah.
enforcement all over the place.
They're all over the place. They're not necessarily on guard or protecting
Yeah.
the area specifically, but like you're saying, because of the proximity, they're able to respond a whole
Mhm.
lot quicker than anywhere else in town, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what impacts do incidents like this have, you feel like, on attorneys like you and I, courthouse staff, judges, and the public?
I think for a lot of them, I mean, it causes you to revisit your security protocols. I mean, I think for a lot of courthouse staff, a lot of judges, and I mean, even law enforcement in general, I mean, they're taking this opportunity. What can we do better? I know for some of the staff at the legal support center, it was kind of, okay, well, what is our protocol if we need to get out the building? And so I think for a lot of them, it comes back to revisiting what those protocols are. Um,
Mhm.
from the conversations I've had, I mean, people don't feel like the courthouse is an unsafe place because, I mean, again, they've got a lot of security in the building, in the area. But it does remind you of, this is what I'm going to every morning, the possibility of, you're dealing with upset people. And I think there's a wide range of negative outcomes between nothing and a shooting that we also would like to avoid, as far as angry or disgruntled clients or opposing parties or opposing counsels or just members of the public. But I think, like I said, for a lot of this, it really is kind of a go back to check on what our security protocols are and just revisit and make sure that we know what to do in case of emergencies.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, if mentally it would have. I mean, it was shocking. It shocked our whole legal community. The North Carolina Bar Association, or the State Bar, I believe, did issue a message of compassion, condolences towards the
Mm,
attorneys who were shot. But like, fortunately, they've recovered, and I believe they're home now. I'm not sure about that, but I know that they have recovered, and no
mm,
one died. But I didn't really hear anything about the issues that we're going to talk about, which is mental health and the victim. Like, as attorneys, like, we're going to get into that. Like, how do we deal with maybe clients who
mm.
society may view as difficult clients? And that's what I was thinking. I was like, could this be a chill pill among lawyers who will want to deal with a difficult client? Because, I mean, there was a lot of hate on social media
Mhm.
towards the lawyers after this. There was a guy that says every attorney in Wake County deserves what those two attorneys got.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy that posted that. There were other people that just started talking about how corrupt lawyers were, how
Yeah.
bad lawyers were. But then, ironically, they turned around and was like, we got to find a lawyer
To raise money for. Yeah.
So I'm just like, and I'm thinking to myself, most lawyers are like, good luck with that. Just being real, like, you said all this bad stuff about lawyers. We're feeling like there's this environment now, maybe about lawyers. And then you turn around and say that you want a lawyer, and not just a lawyer, a free lawyer, a pro bono lawyer to step in.
Mm-hmm.
And help Miss White, and then but I don't know. I mean, there was a lawyer with her in court. It appears at her release here, your first appearance. Yeah, there was a lawyer there, but I don't know if that's going to be the lawyer. Maybe the judge, and maybe they wanted a lawyer to be there at least. Because my understanding is, and again, this is from the news. I don't know for a fact. It was stated in the news that she doesn't recall the shootings. Okay, so how do events like this, like even from maybe the people who are saying lawyers are corrupt? I mean, I probably answered this question. Well, first, let me back up. I want you to answer the question in your words about how do you think this impacts us? I mean, I was doing a lot of talking, but I want you to answer it, Antoine. What do you think about that?
I think it's going to be an individual basis. I mean, I think, attorneys, we are people too. And I mean, we have a wide range of, people who practice law. And I think how it impacts, lawyers in general really does depend on the individual. And I will say that, we have a very, very stressful profession. When we look at a lot of the rates of, drug abuse, suicide, divorces, depression, lawyers rank pretty high on the list when it comes to professions in all of those places. And a lot of that just comes from the stress of the job. So, I think it's a wide range of practice areas. It's a wide range of individuals in those practice areas. And I think it depends on the individual. You got a lot of lawyers who never see the courthouse. And so something like this is, they relate from the standpoint that they're attorneys, but they have no more relationship to the courthouse than any other profession, whether it be an accountant, a teacher, or anything like that, because they don't do anything at the courthouse. So I think it really does depend on the individual. And thankfully, the state bar and the local bars, they do a lot. They've really done a lot in North Carolina to expand mental health services to lawyers. They require us to get, substance abuse screenings and, or CLE hours, continuing legal education hours, and substance abuse. And, they're always pushing the work-life balance and trying to balance out the mental health, because we know the numbers. And unfortunately, in the legal profession, they're not great. Yeah.
Yeah, the Lawyers Assistance Program, it's a great program that reaches out to lawyers because, like you said, the percentages are not great. There's a high percentage of divorce. There's a high percentage of substance abuse. There's a percentage of suicide, mental depression. Because like you said, the job itself is stressful. It could be stressful. And then you add a difficult client or a volatile client that could make it even more stressful. But I guess for those who are supporters of Miss White are people who have been in this situation. How do events like this affect confidence in the legal system, period? What are your thoughts around that?
I think there's a lot of people who don't understand the legal system. And then something like this pushes narratives that if you're in the legal practice, you know that they don't exist, but it definitely pushes a lot of those narratives. And I think some of them definitely have some legitimacy. I think when you look at African Americans in this country and the history of the law not protecting us, and you hear just a blurb of Miss White's situation, and it automatically becomes, oh, this is another situation of the law failing, So when I've seen a lot of the, talk on social media, some of it I just kind of chuckle to myself and just say, hey, the idea that, all attorneys know these two attorneys. There's 6,000 attorneys in Wake County. We don't, obviously.
I don't know them. I personally don't know them. Yeah.
I know of the firm they work for, but that's
Yeah.
about it because I've seen the firm before. But yeah, I mean, there's 6,000 attorneys in Wake County. We don't know all of them. I mean, you're just not going to know. I mean, obviously, some smaller counties, the legal community is very small, but not all lawyers know other lawyers.
Yeah.
I think that some of the things I've seen about the legal system where people, making their comments about the legal system, again, when you look into it, it falls apart pretty quickly. The idea, and this is something I normally get sometimes with clients who come to me and say, oh, nobody will take my case because I'm going up against powerful people. Lawyers have sued presidents. We've sued governors. We've sued states. I mean, the city of Raleigh probably has some current law. My thing, at least for my practice, my experience, if you can't find a lawyer to take your case, either number one, there's no money in it. Number two, you don't have a case. Or number three, you're just a very difficult client because no attorney wants to take somebody who's going to lead to a bar complaint. But generally, those are generally the three things. Or, they come to you for a subject area you don't practice in. If you come to me for a traffic ticket, I can't help you, bro. I mean, it's not an area I do. Yeah. But usually when I hear things like that, and even in this situation, the town of Roseville is corrupt and she couldn't get justice because of people at the top. Roseville's a small town in Wake County. I mean, like, nothing to say, not diminish, the people in Roseville or, the leadership in Roseville, but they don't have the pull to be, coordinating these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, the mayor is very laid back.
Yeah.
All the events, because I live in Wake Forest, which is adjacent to Roseville, and my office was previously in Roseville. And so I've gotten to know all the town officials, the mayor. I even know the chief of police. In this case, he was on my board, the board of a charter school I co-founded, Chief Simmons. So, I hear these things that are being alleged about him that, he may have ordered the deletion of, I guess, the video. I haven't dived into why, but I'm assuming because some time has passed based on what I was able to read, he ordered that deletion of it. But, what I do know about him, I can't personally say that he's a malicious person, but hey, I don't know everybody, right? I don't know how to work behind closed doors. I only know him on a social level, but I'm just saying he personally has not stricken me to be, he doesn't strike me to be that type of officer or person or human being because of the time that we shared on the board and we get to know one another. And we've also have had some conversations outside of board work. So I don't know, but hey, she's entitled to have access to the courts and to bring the claim, she feels that she has against the town. And so, but, lawyers, and back to your point about how they feel like we know each other. I mean, we know each other, Antoine. We actually had clients that were in adverse positions, right? But we were able to put, our friendship aside, knowing one another aside, and you did what you had to do for your client, and I did what I did for my client. You didn't expect me to say, okay, Antoine, you're in this case, I'm not going to do it. And I didn't expect you to be like, that's Yolanda, I'm not going, we don't do that, y'all. We don't do that, y'all. I mean, we are trained professionals. We are trained and we have ethical responsibilities. We have a whole book of regulations that govern our professional responsibilities to our clients.
And if you don't go by them, you could lose that license.
You can lose your license if you don't follow the rules of professional responsibility, right? That the bar regulates for attorneys who are practicing here in North Carolina. And most states have something similar, but you owe loyalty to your clients. There is something called attorney-client privilege. There is something called confidentiality as it relates to your client. So all the lawyers I know, adhere to these ethics. I'm not saying that there are not some rogue lawyers out there who, for whatever reason, may not, but the ones I associate with do. So, I mean, you're right about why we may not take a case. And we're going to get into pro se litigants a little more. But I want to ask you, because we're going to transition into this mental health piece, right? We often focus on, criminal allegations, but there are real human beings on every side of these situations victims, families, colleagues, and communities, the things that we have talked about just now. We don't live in a silos. Most attorneys don't. We have a broad network. We know a lot of people. But I want to ask you, have you had an opportunity to, I guess, read some of the courthouse pleadings regarding Miss White's case against the town of Roseville?
Yeah, I had a chance to go into the case that was filed against the town of Roseville. And I mean, I think the one thing, their court records, they're public. I mean, so anybody can go to the North Carolina court website and go to the portal, type the name in, and pull up the case. I mean, you just got to know what you're looking for. But, you know, I just want to make sure it's clear. I'm not using any kind of special lawyer clearance or anything like that. I just know how to access the records because I know how to use the portal. It's open to the public. Outside of cases involving harm to children or domestic violence cases, anything that's filed in North Carolina becomes public record. And, you know, you can, you know, there are few carve outs where things aren't accessible by the public, but if it's filed in court, it's public record. So I did have a chance to go through and read Miss White's case against the town of Roseville. And I will say, I mean, she had a history of litigation. She's sued a lot of different people. Her name appears several times in starting lawsuits against organizations, against people, and all of them, from what I've seen, have been pro se. She's had a couple of them where she's had an attorney represent her, but most of the cases she filed were pro se or without an attorney for those who are not.
Okay, wow. And so I don't know if you feel at liberty to make any conclusions based on what you saw about the case against Roseville, especially as it relates to some of these allegations that we're seeing on social media, which is that that Roseville Police Department was held in contempt because they didn't produce the documents. It looks like they did end up getting a IT person,
yeah,
to come and, like, I guess somehow try to retrieve the video, and it was on a flash drive. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so first going back, I said there was a lot of talk on social media that this shooting, I know that Miss White made some allegations that the nursing home that her mother was in was abusing her. I don't know the full story behind that, so I'm not going to speculate on that. But purely looking at the case that she was in court for before the shooting, that there was a argument between Miss White and one of her neighbors. And the police were called out in order to break up that fight. There were two officers who were out there. During that, while the officers were out there, she claims that the neighbors made some statement as to admitting to harassing her, stalking her. And it's weird how it's typed up, but it sounds like she said that there was some allegations that they admitted to a murder or something like that, or to killing somebody. So she filed a request to release the police body camera video from the town of Roseville. Now, this is all governed under state law. There's a whole process as far as how you would go about getting police body camera footage revealed. Yeah. And so when she originally filed that paperwork, it was granted. I think Judge Vince Rozier heard the case. He granted and said, "Hey, Roseville, this is a legitimate, request. Go ahead and release the video." The town of Roseville did not release the video, and then she filed what's called a show cause motion. For the non-attorneys, a show cause is basically, if there's a court order, the court instructs you to do something, and you do not do it, you have to show cause as far as why you did not adhere to that court order. And so she filed a show cause motion, basically saying that she didn't receive anything, even though they were required to release the video. The town of Roseville has a policy that unless a body camera video reveals anything that leads up to charges, they delete it within 30 days. They do a lot of this for spacing concern because data storage is expensive. And I mean, if you're a small town like Roseville, do you really want to spend, $50,000 a year storing body camera footage for a long period of time? So their policy was delete within 30 days. And she by the time she had filed her action, I think I don't have the dates entirely, but the argument between her and the neighbor happened like February of 24. She didn't request the body camera footage until like March of 25. And this more than 30 days had been passed. It was deleted. They did show good cause, good faith effort as far as trying to get it. They hired an IT person and produced one of the officer's body camera footage. She claims that it wasn't that officer, but it was the other officer's body camera footage that had the information that she was seeking. There was a talks about a flash drive that was given to her, but the flash drive was blank. As far as that's concerned, so she filed another show cause motion. It went in front of a different judge, and that judge basically ruled against her because in order to be held in contempt, because what happens if you go to a show cause motion, you file a show cause, you go to court, you can be held in contempt for not adhering to the court order. But in order to be held in contempt, you've got to show not only did you violate the court order, but you could have adhered to it, but you didn't. Mm-hmm. And in this case, they're saying, we deleted the footage. We can't produce what she's asking for because it doesn't exist anymore. We did our best to try to get that footage for her. This is all we could get. And so the judge basically said that they didn't willfully violate the order, that they didn't have the grounds to actually produce the videos that she's seeking. I know people are, obviously the conspiracy theories are out there that, why could they produce one and not the other? What was on the whole flash drive thing? I don't think there's enough facts for anybody other than the Roseville police and Ms. White to kind of weigh in on that. But essentially legally, when I looked at the legal judgments, I don't think that the judges made any mistakes there. I think that they were right to grant the motion to release. I think that they were right to deny the show causes because, again, the policy is clear. The policy's been on the books for a while. They went over and beyond what they needed to do as far as trying to get the videos. And unfortunately, it just wasn't what she was looking for.
Yes, it sounds like, they made a determination that the body cam did not show evidence of a crime committed by the neighbors, right? And so therefore, because the footage allegedly did not have evidence of a crime, then why will they keep it? Like, why would they keep the video?
Just delete it.
They have a policy that has to be deleted. But that's where, I guess, the public forum, social media, and non-lawyers or people who are advocates and supporters and friends of Ms. White feel like that's possibly a lie. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it comes back.
So there's this mistrust. It goes back to this. There's this mistrust in government. There's this mistrust in the legal system, in judges and lawyers.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it just comes back to people not knowing how government works or functions, or just the practical. One of the things that, I've seen through the legal process is, there are a lot of forms that we fill out and people don't understand those forms. All of them have a purpose. There's a reason behind why all these policies exist. And as lawyers, we're kind of trained on why this policy exists. And when from what I've seen, I've engaged with a couple of people on social media as well. And it was kind of, why did they delete the footage at all? Well, because data storage is expensive. As a taxpayer, don't take my taxpayer dollars to pay for, storing.
Why would they store something? This is their argument. Why would they store something if there's no evidence of a crime on there? And to get into some of the alleged criminal activity that she had against her neighbors, and my understanding is that she had, the neighbors sought a no contact order against her, right? Which is similar to a DV order. If y'all have heard of a DV order, but it's a civil one for people who are not in a domestic type, are in a relationship, right? So these were neighbors. So they sought a 50C no contact order against her because maybe they felt like she was harassing them and as well. But allegedly, the neighbors said in front of the cops, shoot her in the head, from what I was reading. And allegedly the neighbor's wife admitted that her husband was the grand wizard of the KKK.
Yeah.
So I guess all that, and I'm still trying to unpack all of it too. It seems like White felt that all of that would have been on the video cam or the body cam.
I'm assuming it could have been. I'll say I'm not going to deny that those things could have been said, but I also say it's not evidence of a crime. I mean, unfortunately, that's
Evidence of bigotry.
yeah. I'll say, well, I know we
Possibly.
how we feel about the KKK. Obviously, as an African American man in the South, I know the history of the KKK. It's not illegal to say you're the Grand Wizard of the KKK. So I mean, like, unless it's attached to a crime, the physical action of doing something illegal, it still doesn't constitute something that would be recorded and kept. And I mean, I said, I don't know whether or not those statements were said. I mean, people are alleging. I can't weigh one way or another on facts that I don't know, but I can say that even if that was said, there's still no evidence of a crime. The video still gets deleted according to policy. And then when she requests that video nearly a year later or over a year later, it doesn't exist. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think, again, it comes back to there's, the way that the government runs, the bureaucracy runs, the courthouse runs, there's a reason behind why everything is the way it is. And I think a lot of times people don't think about those practical matters. And just focus on the solely how it impacts them or this one particular case. A good example, and one things we always come across in the legal support center is the matter of service. If you file a lawsuit against somebody, you've got to notify them of the lawsuit. There are specific rules about how you serve the other party. And we get a lot of cases, well, can't I just hand it to her? No, you cannot. I understand why you would think that would be a reason, yes, I can just go physically hand it to them and now they know. But legally, no, because then anybody could say that. Yeah, I gave Yolanda I gave her the paperwork to say that I was suing her for $10 million. Oh, and she didn't respond. Now I can get the default judgment. There's a reason why, you got to go through a sheriff or you got to do certified. Process, but there's a process and people just overlook that process and think what's most convenient to them and not the overall system.
Yeah, and just being careful, like all those things that I stated earlier, like you said, yeah, there's a process. And if you're not a lawyer, then you don't really understand how to navigate that process. And I know you worked at the Wake County Legal Support. When you were there, is that something you guys help people navigate? Is that something that the Wake County Legal Support will do for people who are pro se or someone who doesn't have legal counsel?
Yes. Yeah. So about the Wake County Legal Support Center, it is it's only in Wake County. So it's a feature of Wake County. It's relatively new. So it started about 3 years ago. And the whole goal of it was one of the Wake County judges, Judge Ashley Parker, she's one of the ones who was instrumental in getting it started. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is that it gives legal information to people who show up pro se. If you show up without an attorney, the courthouse is a very sophisticated process. It can be a complex process. One of the things that frustrates people when they come down to the courthouse is that when they go to the clerks, in civil matters, that they can't give you legal advice. So if you show up there and say, hey, I'm Antoine, I want to file for a divorce, they say, okay, you need to submit the forms. Well, what form do I need to submit? Well, we can't tell you that. That'd be legal. So, again, there's that frustration, like, we know, but you can't tell me. So that's what the Legal Support Center does for pro se individuals. And actually, I guess attorneys could ask the Legal Support Center too, but they should also know. But for pro se individuals, if you don't have an attorney, you try to navigate the civil legal process. Now, they don't do any work with the criminal process. And depending on what your situation is, you get a court-appointed attorney. One thing people forget is that, in civil matters, you're not appointed a court-appointed attorney. There's a lot of family law cases, a lot of housing cases, but there are also, small claims, district court, superior court. How do I file for a divorce? How do I file for a custody matter? I'm trying to sue my neighbor for, or this. And if you don't know how to navigate the system, they've got forms, they've got templates, they can kind of guide you through, okay, this is the paperwork you need to fill out. Here's how you serve the other party. They can give legal information. They can't give you legal advice about your specific case. You say, hey, I want to, what do I need to write here? We can't tell you that, but they can tell you, this is the form you need. We can guide you through this, how you fill out the form. This is the information they're asking for. And then after you fill this out, this is where you go to file it. This is the clerk's office, you need to file it. Here's how you could serve the other party. And so that's generally what the Legal Support Center does.
Yeah. And I want to go back just to be fair to both sides about some of the allegations that Ms. White mentioned. And I don't know if you're at liberty to say whether or not Ms. White took advantage of these services at the Wake County Legal Support Center. I don't know if you can share that. If you can't, I understand. But I hope that maybe, she at least had those resources when she was trying to file some of her pleadings.
I don't recall. I mean, I'm saying I can't. I don't recall seeing her ever at the legal support center. I mean, we do have people who there were definitely regulars who showed up often to handle their cases. And I mean, again, every time they show up, we help to the best of our ability. I don't recall her ever using this legal support center, but I wasn't there long. So, and obviously some of her pleadings go back for an extended period of time.
Yes. And I do want to just say too, like to my earlier point, to be fair to the listeners and be fair to both sides, some of the allegations that she did allege probably could have been crime if there was proof of it. Like she claims to the Roseville police, allegedly, she claims that her neighbors broke into her home, right? That they were poisoning, what was it? Put poison through her HCV system. And even felt that they were poisoning her food. There was a picture on social media where she had these chains tied on her refrigerator door because she felt like, her food was being poisoned. And I also dived into the pleadings related to her mom, because I wanted to know, because that to me that was the most disturbing thing and heartbreaking thing is her mother and how her mother died and her mother's condition her physical condition before she passed, based on photographs that were shared all over, the internet and social media. So I wanted to figure out, how does she become a ward of the state to begin with? And according to the Garden Lidum's report, which is what I was able to find, the actual petition to make her a ward, those were just almost like blank document. They were forms, right? That you can use forms to initiate that process. And forms are located on nccourt.gov, right? So you can find those forms. But the forms were pretty much just bare bones. But there was a report that the law firm who became the guardian ad litem of her mother, they talked about that she was left at Duke Hospital, Raleigh Duke Hospital in Raleigh, and that the hospital is what triggered this whole process because no one was there to pick her up, allegedly. And then that allegedly Miss White also wanted her to have care outside of her care. But some of the report indicated that at that point in time, when she became a ward, it's being alleged in that report that maybe Miss White has some mental health challenges even then. But I also read somewhere, and I don't know if it was that particular report, but in the pleadings where she was saying that she allegedly was saying that her mom was telling her that someone was breaking into the home. So whether or not someone was breaking into the home, I mean, that has not been a fact that's been proven in court. It hasn't been proven to be true. It hasn't been proven to be a lie either. But I will say that breaking into someone's home could constitute an offense such as breaking and entering. And if her neighbors had threatened to kill her, that could potentially constitute communicating a threat, maybe. But the police, they're there to determine whether or not, this he say, she say verbal altercation between neighbors, whether or not there's enough there that they could charge someone. And apparently they didn't think it was enough to result in criminal charges, which is what the police is going to look for. So I guess my question to you is, if Ms. White believed she was the victim of criminal conduct and spent years attempting to obtain evidence she believed would support her claims, I guess my question is it legally accurate to say that if she thought all this and the police department disagreed with her assessment and the courts ultimately addressed the matter through civil litigation process, what are your thoughts about that? If she believes she was a victim of crime, which a lot of people do, and we know that sometimes there's not justice. We know that the courts don't always get it right? But apparently she believes that she was a victim of criminal conduct and therefore spent years attempting to obtain evidence to support her claims. The police department disagreed with her assessment. And I guess the court ultimately addressed it by dismissing the case, I believe, in January of 2026. And so she was there to do what on the day of the shooting? Was it to get a new trial or something?
Yeah, she was trying to get a new trial. She had tried to get the judge who did the dismissal off the case and get Judge Rozier back onto the case.
Okay.
It went before him. He said, "I'm not the appropriate judge. You need to go back to the judge who had ruled against you." And so she was trying to get it back on the calendar. And I will say that it's been something I've seen in a lot of her filings. I mean, she had a lot of cases that have not gone her way, and she's appealed them. And unfortunately, she's worked them all the way up the ladder as much as she could for a lot of those cases.
Okay. So when you're saying that she's been very litigious, like more than probably, it sounds like she's filed more cases than I filed, like in the last 2 years, according to what you're saying, right? Kudos to her.
It's a lot.
Having the energy to do that, and I guess the mindset to want to do that because it was going through the courthouse. But what role do you think? Because they're alleging she has mental health challenges. What role does mental health challenges play, I guess, in legal disputes and court involvement based on your experience? Do you see it a lot? Have you seen it a lot?
I think, yeah, I've seen it a lot. I mean, obviously, you work with legal aid as well as I have. And
Yeah.
when we talk about the client base who generally makes up, the low income population who works at legal aid, it's a higher percentage of individuals who suffer from, lower education levels, mental health challenges, other disabilities. And they have problems just like everybody else, and unfortunately, they probably have a harder time expressing or finding results from those problems. Ways to resolve those problems. I think, from the standpoint of, does it make it harder? I think number one, it makes it harder to just represent yourself in court.
Yes.
Because a lot of cases, especially if you are not an attorney, you don't know what kind of evidence you need. And you're not really skilled at structuring your argument or your evidence to be believable. And so you got to remember that, the person who's going to be hearing these cases, whether it be judge or jury, and I think she's had a couple of jury trials in there as well, but you got to convince somebody else that what you're saying is true.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, sometimes people who are struggling from mental health challenges, some of the things they say, there will be some splices of the truth in there that also gets overtaken by some of the other things that are not part of the truth. And when you go across to a jury or a judge who's trying to make sense of your argument and trying to pull apart your argument, I think it makes it very difficult for, anybody to do that, to rationally come across and say, oh yeah, they may have said 100 things that don't sound plausible, believable at all, but I'm going to, that one thing that they did say was true, I'm going to focus on that. It is very hard for anybody to do that, especially, so I think it makes it harder to present your case. I think, obviously, this is less the mental health part, but more the educational piece, but being able to research, the law, figure out what, you could possibly do, what you could possibly, what options are out there for you to seek any kind of remedy. So I think all of that makes it very difficult, if you don't have a legal background, if you're having any kind of disability, whether it be a learning disability, a mental health challenge, a physical disability. And, I know that was one of the things that, at the Legal Support Center that they try to do is to make sure that they reduce any, that they reduce any of the barriers to access to justice. One of the things they saw was that a lot of the documents need notary services, but if I know the nearest notary to the courthouse is that UPS, which is around the block. But if you have a physical disability, you can't get there. And UPS also charges. So they made sure that all the employees there were trained notaries. Now, they only notarize documents that are handed out at the Legal Support Center. But it was one of those things where if they've got to leave and pay $15 and come back, they're less likely to do it. So let's go ahead and bridge that gap. So it's trying to figure out where those gaps are, where we lose people in the legal process, and try to bridge those gaps to get them in order to make sure that they have equal access to justice.
And so that's definitely like commendable work that the Wake County Legal Support Center does to, like you say, bridge that particular gap when it comes to access to justice. I mean, because that's really huge. And to your point about judge trying to figure out pleadings that were filed by someone who's not a lawyer, like you say, who doesn't know how to lay out the facts, lay out case law, even lay out statutes, or lay out, what evidence, especially if they're trying to have a trial, supports it, because it's not a judge's job to fix your pleadings.
Yep.
They don't fix our pleadings as lawyers. It's not their job to fix our pleadings. So it's not their job. I mean, because they're supposed to be a neutral trier of fact. So it's not their job to fix a pro se litigant's pleading, or to help them, or to coach them on what they need to say. And wow. So, I mean, it's just a lot. It really is. But thank you for laying out, like, your thoughts around the mental health challenge here. I know I posted a video on my own personal page about, this is a time to have this broader conversation about mental health, this broader conversation about the lack of access to justice. Legal aid has lost tremendous funding. The General Assembly has basically froze funding, that was coming from my interest on Lori's trust account. And I think it was $5 million. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot of money that they lost, right? Yep. So for those of you who are concerned about access to justice, call your state legislator, ask them, why did they cut the money from legal aid? Tell them that you want legal aid to be refunded again. Say all that, but when we talk about why do people, represent themselves, I mean, sometimes it's financial. That's why legal aid is there.
A lot of times it's financial. Yeah,
they can't afford a lawyer, and then people get mad at us because they feel that we're too expensive.
Mm-hmm. it's definitely a balance.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a balancing act that I think about a lot myself. And, even when I started my firm, I came from legal aid. And when I started my firm, I didn't know how to bill clients because I'd never had to do it before.
Yes.
And so, I remember I was talking to a mentor attorney of mine because I had a situation. And I mean, it was an easy situation. Basically, a demand letter cleared it up. I just needed to write a letter, put my letterhead on it. And it was like a $10,000 deal that, they were blocking them on. I sent the letter and got it solved. Now, for me, drafting that letter took all of 10 minutes. And, I struggled with the idea on how to bill it because, obviously I was a struggling attorney. I think that everybody believes attorneys make a lot of money. Not all of us. But when I was talking to my mentor attorney, he was, I billed for, it was a very insignificant amount of money. And he asked me, he said, because when he asked me why I billed, what I did, I said, it only took me about 5 minutes. And he said, okay, could your client have done that? And I said, probably not, because he wouldn't have hired me if he could have done it. And he said, I know it took you 5 minutes, but the reason why your letter succeeded and his failed was because of that letterhead. That letterhead came with, 4 years of college, 3 years of law school, student loan debt, studying and practicing for the bar, 20 hours of continuing legal education every month. And that letter got your client $10,000. So obviously the difference between you're not paying for your time, you're paying for all the education that I took up to know what I'm saying and, to get that letterhead.
Right, yeah.
And so, I obviously my fees have gone up over time as I've gotten more experience and more comfortable with the law, with areas of law practice. And I know lawyers are expensive. I mean, I wouldn't be able to hire me if I had, when I think about a lot of the issues, if I come across some issues, I'm like, man, a lawyer would make it easier. I wouldn't be able to hire me for this case, So, it's nothing to find an attorney, $250 an hour, $500 an hour. Some of, depending on the case, some of them go up to $1,000 an hour. Mm-hmm. And, for some cases, especially like if you're in a small claims court where, the maximum is $10,000, it's not even worth it to hire an attorney. I mean, you're going to pay me, sometimes I have people come to me and I'll tell them, I could take your case, but you're going to pay me $350 an hour for a case that at most you're looking at $1,500. Mm-hmm. I mean, 2 hours of my work in this case is not really worth it for you. And when it's at the end of the day. So there are a lot of cases where people need that legal service. They need the legal help. But there, like I said, there's not enough individuals in North Carolina. I mean, there are not enough attorneys who can handle those cases. Because I mean, I know one of my areas of practice representing, doing a lot of landlord tenant law, where I focus a lot on representing tenants. It's something that a lot of attorneys don't do because there's not much of a business model behind it, because a lot of tenants can't afford an attorney. So, it's hard. It's harder. It's a harder subject area to find. But yeah, I mean, legal aid was definitely a resource that, they did a lot of work. Unfortunately, they weren't getting the kind of money that they needed to get. And obviously the General Assemblies made it harder for them to get it. During my 6 years with legal aid, I went through 2 rounds of budget cut when I was there. And, that was over a decade ago. And they're still going through it and still struggling with the federal government cutting funds. And it's definitely made it a lot harder for people, especially without an attorney, to find access to legal justice. And I think, lawyers, they level the playing field. I mean, a lot of businesses, a lot of corporations, government can take advantage of people if they don't have access to legal justice. I mean, there's the Shakespearean play where one of the quotes is, "First thing we do is to get rid of all the lawyers." But that was to start a coup. Like, they wanted to start a coup, and basically, they knew that lawyers were the guardians of peace and order and establishment. If you get rid of those, then the parties with money and power can take advantage of people.
Exactly. So, I mean, I think people, on one hand, they're criticizing us, but like I said in the beginning, but then they'll realize, oh, we are going to need a lawyer. What lawyer will take the case? And of course, everyone calls on the National People's Attorney, Benjamin Crump, but Benjamin Crump's going to get paid too now.
Oh, he gets paid, yes.
And then he doesn't do all the cases by himself. He usually associates with local attorneys, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Sometimes the families, these are mostly civil cases that he handles. He doesn't handle criminal cases. He's a civil attorney, right?
Yeah.
When those people may not get justice as it relates in the criminal justice system, then he is able to bring those civil claims for wrongful death or whatever claims he brings as it relates to a family whose loved one was shot by a cop or, beaten by a cop. The most recent case I see that he's on is in Shelby County for the woman, again, someone with mental health challenges, was punched repeatedly in the face by a cop who's immediately fired. So let's talk about AI. We talked about pro se litigants. What are your thoughts about AI? I know ChatGPT can draft some type of pleading, I mean, even lawyers use AI, open AI, to do legal research. But the difference is that we have the legal education, we have the critical thinking skills, we know the substantive area of law. But there are people out there now that are filing pleadings using ChatGPT or Claude. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and it was definitely something that I saw a lot at the legal support center. Somebody would come in and say, "Oh yeah, I chat GPT," and I'm looking through it. And I'm like, "Yeah, I can tell this is AI." I will say, I think it's like any other technology, it's a tool. It can be helpful. It can be hurtful. I mean, we've seen, advances in, I mean, just like social media, we see the positives that come about it as far as people creating communities across the world. Then we also see the detriments, that it causes. I think AI is the same thing. I use AI in my practice. I mean, it makes drafting things a whole lot easier. It'll give me a lot of initial case research, that I can go back and dig into. I think the problem is that you still need to have some basis of understanding in the law if you're going to use AI. And we've seen some attorneys get very over reliant on AI. There's more than one attorney who's been in trouble in the courts for filing AI briefs that have fictional made up, case filings or case citations. And so I think if you know what you're doing, like I said, AI is a great tool. Like I said, I use it a lot in my practice, but I'm reading over everything. I'm going back and doing the background research when it says, oh yeah, this statute. Okay, let me go pull that statute real quick to make sure that I'm looking over it. Yes. And I don't think a lot of lay people have the understanding of the legal process in order to manage that. Or to do that background work. And so I think it ends up, you end up getting some AI slop that's in the courts that they've got to navigate. And I think a lot of it also depends on what prompts you use and which AI services you use. Some of them are better at others. I use an AI service that's specifically focused on the law. I pay a subscription for it. So I trust their results better. And, I'll run their results by ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT says and say, see ChatGPT is not a great one, when it comes to the law.
Which one do you use? Which one do you use?
So the one I use is called Law Y.
Okay, I know.
It's actually through my practice management software. So it came with a subscription to that, and like I said, it makes drafting letters a lot easier, drafting briefs and memos a lot easier. I just kind of go back through and edit them and format them. But I mean, like I said, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, sometimes they give inaccurate information.
Yes,
but if you're not an attorney and you don't know how to site check that AI, then you're going to end up turning in some misleading stuff to court. And as you said earlier, judges are not responsible for fixing your pleadings or fixing your motions. So if you turn in something that's inaccurate or bad, you're kind of going to have to eat the results of that. So, I mean, I think but it has given people some access to justice, by giving them some information that they need. But I think it also, again, can be taken too far. I think there was a case recently where ChatGPT is being sued by an insurance company because I guess it was a car accident case. The individual in the car accident, had an attorney. The attorney worked out a settlement agreement. They ran the attorney's information through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told them, "Oh, that you can get a better deal or whatever." So they fired the attorney. They already agreed to the deal. They fired the attorney, and they started filing a bunch of briefs with the help of ChatGPT, trying to get this thing overturned. And eventually, the insurance company came back and sued not just them, but ChatGPT as well, saying, "Hey, like, it's the unauthorized practice of law."
Yes.
And in my retainer agreements for my clients, I specifically put in there, do not run anything that we discuss through AI, because I think the one thing people forget is that the way that AI works is it just compiles all the information you give it. By sharing information with AI, you have now waived attorney-client privilege. And then on my end, like, I am your attorney, I need you to trust what I'm saying is true. Yes. And if you doubt it, I mean, we can talk about it, but if you are running what I'm saying through software, is my attorney correct? At that point, again, you can let AI do it. At that point, I'd rather not be involved with trying to argue with your AI software telling you what you wanted to hear.
Exactly. And I'm gonna just end this particular topic on this note. Someone told me that someone said they came to their firm, it's a nonprofit firm, and said, "Well, ChatGPT told me I had a case, and ChatGPT told me you should take my case." So, are we in that era where, people are saying I have a case? And I really don't see any differently from the Google era. Because, we used to say the jailhouse lawyer, they were doing research, and they went from the jailhouse lawyer to the Google lawyer. So now it's a ChatGPT lawyer. And the bottom line is, doctors, no one will operate on themselves. No one will cut themselves. I will hope normal person would do that. You trust doctors to do it. And of course, insurance helps people have access to doctors, having insurance does. But even people, when they have certain issues, if they can pay out of pocket, they will willingly pay a doctor. So when I do see people, and let me say, I'm gonna put this context there, is that I do think lawyers should, if we're able to, do pro bono work, right? The state bar encouraged us to do pro bono work, but why do people feel like we should work for free? Well, we got families to support. We got to support ourselves. Will they work for free? Who has a job where they show up and they don't want to get paid, or they don't think they should get paid? So that whole sentiment of lawyers should be paid, or we should do it for free, that's something I've been seeing a lot of as well.
That was something we definitely got a lot of in the legal support center. I mean, they had some attorney referrals specifically for family law, but everybody would come in. Do you have a pro bono or a low cost? Nobody's taking a pro bono family law case. I'm sorry, because
not family law.
You become an attorney of record for
forever, possibly. I mean, for years.
Yeah, so
it's a lot of work, and you're dealing with people who are not at their best. So they're usually difficult clients, difficult cases. They can't agree, because there are a lot of emotions in that. I mean, I think a lot of cases are like that. But I appreciate what you had to say about AI. You also talked about the ethical concerns for lawyers, which was going to be a question I was going to ask you, but you did talk about that. Yeah, we have ethical responsibilities to double check AI, make sure AI is not hallucinating. But again, we have the skill set, the knowledge, and the critical thinking. Like, not only will we look at a statute, we know how to read and interpret the law as well. So anyway, but I want to end this amazing conversation, a serious conversation. I mean, this conversation around what happened with the two attorneys that got shot, and also what could possibly happen now to Miss Gwendolyn White. I feel it's still heartbreaking on both sides. It's heartbreaking that attorneys are now traumatized, because all they were doing was doing their job. The town of Roseville was their client, and they were doing the job for their client, the town of Roseville. And then Miss Gwendolyn White, who it appears, may have some mental health challenges. I don't know exactly when it started. I don't know if it's in grief, the loss of her mom as well. She could be dealing with some grief too. But now she's charged with these serious crimes, and now she's in court again. But this time, she's the defendant that has been charged for committing serious crimes. But the whole thing has been complicated for me, and I don't know about you, is because, one, we're Black lawyers. So that's what I want to ground us with before we leave. I mean, we're Black lawyers. We don't just show up as lawyers. We show up with our experience. We show up with, the knowledge of the things our ancestors have gone through, with the knowledge that the system has been rigged against us, right? And in a lot of circumstances, the system is still rigged against us, because the system, in most cases, housing, I'm a housing justice advocate, in criminal justice, we saw, the acquittal of a store clerk that shot a kid in the back. We know that the system produces inequity, oftentimes when it comes to Black, brown, and indigenous people. So I want to start with saying that, I think for the most part, Black attorneys, not all of us, we do have an eye for justice, right? So, so how do you think our lived experiences have shaped the way, we approach justice issues?
Well, I think I said it earlier that, attorneys, we're people. Like, we come from different backgrounds. The attorney is just a profession, but there's a broad range of experiences, and, unfortunately, it's not reflective of the population. When we talk about the numbers of Black attorneys versus white attorneys, it does not reflect the number of Black people versus white people publicly, so, obviously we know that if you are a racial minority, if you're a religious minority, you probably are less represented in the legal profession. And there's a need for that. In fact, there's a need for cultural competency. There's a need for that diversity in the court system that I think a lot of people overlook. I remember, I think the best highlight I have for this, because I remember when Joe Biden appointed, and I just forgot her name, Supreme Court Justice.
Justice Jackson.
Yes, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yes. So when he appointed Justice Jackson, and the question was, why does their race matter? Why does their ethnicity matter? There was the best example I can give. There was a case in Louisiana from 2015. It was an individual named Warren Demese. I may be pronouncing that wrong, but Demesme. In Louisiana, he was accused of a horrible crime. It was accused of a felony. They brought him back into the police station to interrogate him, and he basically said, it's not me. I didn't do it. And the quote, I said, I can't have the exact quote, but he basically said, it's not me. Like, if you think this is how it went down, I need a lawyer, dog, because this isn't how it's going to go. More or less paraphrasing. He didn't get an attorney. He had made some statements, basically incriminating himself, and he appealed the decision, basically saying he requested an attorney, but one was not provided for him. This case went all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, where there's one Black woman who's on the state Supreme Court at the time, 6 white men. And they ruled that by asking for a lawyer dog, he did not fully effectuate his request for counsel, and it was ambiguous, and therefore he would not get a new trial
Mm.
by a 6-1 ruling. And remember, there was one. So I say that to say, like, there's a level of cultural competency. There's not a single black person you could go to in this country and say, hey, read this quote where this guy asked for a lawyer dog, and think that he was asking for a dog who was capable of practicing law.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's
That was his vernacular. That was his street vernacular, right?
vernacular, yes. But it's something that most I think as a black attorney, you understand, like,
You know.
and so I think there's that level of cultural competency of understanding somebody's lived experience. And obviously, that's a very extreme example. But I mean, when I go into court as a black man, I think, if you go in there as a black woman, if you go in there as a Muslim attorney, if you go in there as a gay attorney, you carry those lived experiences in how you represent your clients. And I think that, number one, it helps you relate to some clients better. There are a lot of immigration attorneys who may have gone through the immigration process themselves or had a family member who's gone through it. Mm-hmm. And so they know it from a more personal level. I got into doing a lot of landlord tenant law first, by working with legal aid, but my dad's a landlord. He owned a couple of rental properties. That's how I got into representing landlords. So I represent both sides, but that was kind of influenced my practice area because, hey, I know about this because, I grew. So I think all of that kind of plays into your experience, your professional experience, how you play the role, and then just understanding society in general. I mean, like I really do feel for Miss White. I know that there's definitely systems of injustice out there and inequity out there. And I think one of the most parasitic things about racism is that we don't necessarily know exactly when it applies. Like, if I don't get that job, is it because I was unqualified or because I was black? I don't know. I can try to draw some conclusions about that, but still, I'm never really fully told of when my race impacts me. I know when I was a kid, when I was coming up through high school, I wanted to, you could take the PSAT as a freshman in high school. My brother was a sophomore. It was required for him. My dad gave me the money to take to my guidance counselor to sign up for the PSAT. I went in there and talked to my guidance counselor, and he told me he didn't think that college was right for me. Gave me a pamphlet of jobs you can get with a high school diploma. Now, I'm 14. I left the office. I'm like, okay, cool. I left the office there. But thinking back to it, again, I don't know whether or not he gave that to me because I'm a black man. And I never will know. And I think in this situation with Miss White, I mean, again, I don't know the full facts behind her case, but I can't say that her case wasn't influenced by race. Neither can she. And so, I mean, I think when we carry ourselves as black attorneys, when women go in there as female attorneys, you carry that with you and at least have some knowledge or understanding of the intricacies of your protected class and how it impacts the law.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. I agree with all of that because you never really know. Like, I mean, I guess sometimes I go in and I assume that if I'm representing my client, I try to just shop. We all just shop. Attorneys do too.
Oh, like, yeah.
What vibes I get from this judge, right? Does this judge have biases that have been, displayed? Maybe in other cases, I'm watching to see are the sentences fair that you just gave dude over here 15 years. This dude's coming up, he committed the same crime, or you're going to give him 15 years, Are you going to try to find and work harder for some mitigating circumstances, right? So, just watching, and that's what I used to do when I did a bunch of litigation in court. I mean, when I was an attorney, I just felt like sometimes, judges were always trying to hold me in contempt. Not all the judges, but in Wilson County, because I came out hard, right? It's Taylor, I'm going to only warn you once. Stop questioning the witness like that, or you're going to be found in contempt of court. I'm like, but, Einstein over here, white guy with beard and spectacle glasses on, he just did the same thing to my client, but I do it. And now all of a sudden I'm going to be held in contempt of court, for the same type of aggressive questioning. Maybe I'm being viewed as an angry black woman. I don't know. But definitely as a lawyer, I can see it. And definitely as a lawyer and someone looking at this case, I do go in, like Miss Gwendolyn White's case, assuming that maybe race could have been involved. I don't know. But then as a lawyer, reading the pleadings and looking at the process, I can't say I fully decided that it was, because of the mental health thing. And so that's why we also need lawyers that may have had mental health challenges, that may have to take medication to be well, to be able to even understand that layer, right?
Yep.
That layer of, like we were saying, when are the facts there? When are the facts construed because of a mental health challenge? So many different perspectives are needed in the justice system. I will say that. So it's been a pleasure to speak with you today, Antoine. I really do thank you, Attorney Marshall, I should say,
Antoine.
Antoine, for being here today. Because for many Black lawyers, practicing law has never been solely from what we're saying about statutes and case law. It's also been about understanding how systems affect real people. We often bring multiple perspectives into the room at the same time. We can support victims, but we can also demand accountability, and we can recognize, I feel, systemic inequities. But we both today have acknowledged the role that mental health and trauma may play in someone's life. I don't know if there's one solution you want to throw out there that you may have thought about as it relates to Hispanic. You have along the way talked about access to justice, mental health, but I wanted to kind of like give you the last word before I close out.
So, my background is in politics and public policy. And so, to hammer everything's a nail, to me, everything comes back to government policy. And there are definitely policies that can be put in place to help people. We have hollowed out our mental health treatment system. We need to recruit, train, and, deploy more mental health professionals. And I think that with government funding, we can do that. We talk about, them weakening legal aid, and reducing money and taking money away from legal aid and legal support centers. And I think, the funding for that, that to me made no sense because it wasn't even taxpayer money. The way that system worked was that attorneys have trust accounts. Those trust accounts gather interest. We don't give that interest back to the clients, nor do we give them to the attorneys. It goes into this pool of money to support these people. So,
yeah, it
didn't cost taxpayers anything for them to, and they still decided to gut legal aid and legal support organizations. So, for me, a lot of it can be fixed by just better policy. Now, obviously, I think there's some things that the community can do as far as, looking out for our neighbors and, trying to trigger. If we see something, say something when it comes to somebody suffering from mental health episodes. But that's not my ministry. My ministry is what public policy can we put in place to try to solve these problems. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do to strengthen our mental health system and our access to justice.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for being here today. Thank you, listeners, for leaning in this morning and listening to the show. Today we discussed a tragedy. We discussed, the healing that these attorneys are going to have to heal from. But if all we take away from this conversation is what happened in, downtown Raleigh, we miss a larger lesson. The lesson is that justice is oftentimes bigger than a courtroom. It's about whether people can access help before a crisis. It's whether mental health challenges are recognized before they become emergencies. Justice is also about whether or not ordinary people can navigate systems that often feel confusing, intimidating, and out of reach. Justice is about whether or not communities have the resources that they need to thrive. As lawyers, we often enter the story after something has already gone wrong, right? But perhaps our greatest challenge is helping to build a society where fewer things go wrong in the first place. A society where people do have access to counsel, access to care, access to opportunity, a place in a society where people do feel seen, heard, supported, and empowered. Where all of this stuff that we're saying is justice becomes a lived reality. I'm attorney Yolanda Taylor. Thank you again, attorney Antoine Marshall. Thank you for joining All Rights Reserved. And remember, know your rights, protect your rights, exercise your rights, get a lawyer, you need one, because justice works best when it's accessible to everyone. Have a good day. Thank you. Stay right here, plugged into 92.1 FM, the People's Choice Station.
All rights reserved with Yolanda Taylor on Choice.